Nothing but illustrious guests here on GameSpot's Play for All, our charity drive and gaming showcase for the summer. I'm really excited for this segment because we have someone who shaped the Gears of War franchise and who is now shaping the Diablo franchise. Rod Fergusson, executive producer on the Diablo franchise. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's been pretty wild to see that transition because we know we've been keeping up with your work back when you were on Gears, but now Diablo is in it's such a fascinating time for the franchise because you have D4, we have D2R, we have Immortals on mobile. So, but I think let's get out of the way. I know you can't say much, but the folks need to know. They're gonna roast me if I don't ask you. Is there anything you can share or update us on with regards to Diablo 4?
Yeah, well, I mean, since we did our announce, the dev team has been really focused on making sure we're communicating with the players. And so we've been putting out this quarterly dev blog, and we even had sort of a video one, if you will, or a visual one at BlizzCon recently. So our next one's coming. So at the end of this month, we're going to have a new dev blog. It's going to be really focused on character and character art. So we're really excited to share that with players. So that's the next big thing from D4.
All right, sweet. Now we got that out of the way. We can focus on Diablo II Resurrected.
What are we here to talk about? I have no idea.
Oh, wow. Peep the shirt. So, yeah, we're here to talk specifically about Diablo II Resurrected because we are recording this before the Xbox showcase, but I'm going to ask you ahead of time, how does it feel to be on that stage now, showing off what you're working on? It is kind of weird, though, because obviously Gears is so tied to Xbox, and now that you're like, yo, I'm with Blizzard now, and you're back on the Xbox stage, but how does it feel to represent Diablo on that stage now?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a little surreal, honestly. Like I was thinking about that because I've been on the actual stage at E3 a number of times as part of being with Microsoft, and around this time we'd be like, you'd have had to go and get your clothes because you always have to buy new wardrobe to be on the stage. You'd be doing rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, and just trying to make sure that what you had was going to be great. And so it's been kind of funny to not have that process going on and not being part of that anymore. But it's really exciting to be able to bring something new to that. I mean, Diablo, has been traditionally, at least in its long history, especially in terms of Diablo II Resurrected, has been a PC-only kind of franchise for a while until Diablo III came to console, and I actually like it better on console personally. But it's strong on console there, and so one of the things I'm really excited about is being able to bring Diablo II to a whole new audience, a whole bunch of players who never had necessarily, from an age perspective, they may not have been born when this game came out, or they're just not PC gamers and they didn't play it on PC. And so the fact that we're bringing this game back in a really modern, contemporary way for new players on console, and we get to do that and announce our ship date, show off what the cinematics look like, and do that all on the E3 stage the virtual E3 stage is really exciting.
So Diablo II Resurrected, like you said, is coming out September 23rd. That's really soon, all things considered. And there's going to be a beta sometime in August. And we've had the technical alpha, which I played a ton of. A lot of memories were unlocked during playing the technical alpha. It was really wild to see how much it's been revamped. So since the technical alpha, what kind of feedback have you seen? What kind of changes are you making as you get much closer to the actual release date and coming closer to a more open beta?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. It was one of the things we really wanted to do, was to make sure that we were having the game, available for player feedback. We wanted to hear what the players thought, and that was like that single player alpha was really a big moment for the team because, we've been making certain decisions around what do you keep parity in the original and what do you improve, and we're kind of making those choices based on our philosophy and what we think is the right choice. And when we put it out there for alpha, we got people loved it. It was the response has been fantastic, similar to your response, but we do get feedback, which is great, and we're listening to that. As we look at different things around big things around, hey, this is a little bit, like for example, that you spawn in before the load screen is gone, and so you can be killed when you spawn in. Like that's a big thing. We have to fix that, right? And then there are small things like, hey, I find the lightning too thin, or the blizzard isn't blizzardy enough. And so, it's a wide range of feedback, and we're able to sort of focus on it and really listen to what the players wanted. And we even took it a step further. One of the things I really wanted to do in the alpha is partner with able gamers, and so we were able to get disabled players to play as well and give us feedback. I mean, it's hard when it's a 21-year-old game you're building on top of. You can't necessarily do everything you want to do, but we at least wanted to understand, like, are there blockers, or how can we help? And so we've been really looking at what we can do with that feedback as well.
Sweet, that sounds great. I mean, that kind of goes into my next question too, is trying to determine what you can and cannot change, or what you want and don't want to change. So kind of, how do you determine that as you step into a new role, you're got your hands on something that is very precious to a lot of players?
Yeah, I mean, our key word was authenticity. Like, how do we keep the experience authentic? And so there are things about the game that can make it challenging in a good way. For example, you get a quest and it doesn't tell you, now go here to do the quest. Like, you have to go and discover and explore, and we think that's a big part of the game. And then there's things like the fact that you don't have a shared stash amongst characters means you have to create mule characters, and you're dropping stuff on the ground and relogging in really quickly, and it's not, it doesn't add to the experience. It's just part of what the technology was like back 21 years ago. So we've been really focused on making the game more accessible, and that's from, you know, how to play, from those types of things I just talked about, the workarounds that people had to do, from bringing it to console, and even, you know, some accessibility features as well. But we've really been focused on parity, and that's one of the nice things, is that the original Diablo II game, that 2D sprite-based game, is underneath the covers. It's the engine that's driving all the gameplay decisions. Did you kill that monster? Did you get that loot? All that is being driven by the original game. And what we've done is put a layer on top of it, which is this 4K HD surround sound layer that sort of takes all that engine and represents it in a higher fidelity. And so it has been tricky, but we wanted to bring quality of life. We know that people wanted things like a shared stash, and we know that they wanted things like auto gold pickup the way a contemporary game would. Yeah. But there were other things that we were just like, oh, that's a bridge too far. That's simplifying the game, not making it easier to play. Like, we want it easier to play, but not easy, if you know what I mean, or easier. Yeah. And so it's been a lot of that, but how we give people more access and make it and onboard them in a better way.
Yeah, I think when I covered the technical alpha, I was like, oh, damn, I got my ass kicked. Like, I don't know how to control mobs anymore. Like, oh, I forgot how to do that. And I learned real fast. I can't think of Diablo 2 playing it any other than keyboard and mouse. And then for D3, I can't imagine playing it other than like a gamepad. And like, those two games just like feel so different in my mind. And it really stood out when I played the D2R technical alpha. But how have you adapted the core of D2 onto a console experience? Because there's a lot of, like you said, the basis of D2 is still the core thing that's running this game. But I can imagine like things like inventory management and how you like control mobs, how you fire off skills and get away and move and pick things up in the environment. How have you, like, broadly, like, how have you just made this a sensible console experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a focus on understanding what the console and the controller is good at, and understanding that, again, it's one of those things where we try some things and we go, that's too far. Like we had for a while, when you plugged in a controller, your inventory auto sorted for you to try to keep, so you didn't have to do the inventory Tetris. And it was like, oh, this kind of breaks the game. This is kind of inventory Tetris is part of the game itself.
Yeah.
And so finding creative ways to allow you to move things between, let's say, your inventory and your belt, or your inventory and your stash, and shortcuts, and the way that it feels in terms of, like, some skills are dependent, like Sorcerer's Teleport, you know, it depends on where you click to. And so now we're having to sort of predict, you know, a certain range of distance and those sorts of things based on how you use the controller. But it fundamentally is just a change from you're telling the character where to go, to you are the character giving him, you know, that direction through the sticks. And that was the team, the dev team just did a fantastic job. It was like the very first time we implemented controller support, it was already very playable, and it felt it felt great to play, especially as, like I said, I'm similar to you. Like, I play D3 on a gamepad mostly, and so I was kind of interested to be like, how is this going to feel to control it, because it's not built from the ground up for this, and so how is it going to work? And it feels great, like, especially like ranged attacks feel really good, melee attacks feel really good. It's just stuff like, why, you know, auto gold pickup works so well. It's like one of the things, going in and trying to identify every single piece of gold and picking them up, you know, with every button press was just too much for like, and
Yeah.
so there's certain things that get turned on as an option. Now those things you can turn off, and that's a lot of things that we did too. Is like when we made a choice, we sometimes made it an option where maybe somebody loves auto gold pickup and maybe somebody doesn't, and so they can choose whether to turn it on or turn it off based on their playstyle. But yeah, it was really just trying to make it feel more native, even though that it wasn't. Like you don't want it to feel like, oh, this is a PC port and therefore it feels kind of like, I don't know, clunky and those sorts of things. And so we've dedicated a lot of effort in trying to make that feel smooth and to feel like you have precision, to feel like you can do what you want to do, and it feels like a great console experience.
Moving to controller, had it any effect on how you perceive the balance of certain classes, if at all?
No, I mean it all. I mean, like I said, there are certain things where you would have a certain precision about where you could do certain things, but it's the same thing for Diablo 3 is that certain builds, like certain barbarian builds, are easier with mouse and keyboard than they are with controller, as an example. So one of the things we really, because we were trying to deliver that authentic experience, we just didn't want to mess with balance. That we know that there are certain balance issues, and potentially like the people call the hammered in with the paladin with is a strong character build currently in the build, but that idea that we were changing a bunch of things visually, we didn't want to get into changing the balance of how the game plays too, because it felt a little too risky. And so everything we did was very focused on keeping the balance as it is.
So this open beta that's coming up is going to be the time you get to kind of test out multiplayer, because I know technical alpha was single player only, got our feet wet there, but I'm kind of excited to jump back into D2 multiplayer. I remember my friends back in high school doing they carried me often, and I expect them to do it again this time around. But yeah, what can we expect from the multiplayer aspects in the beta, or even the full game?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the part of we're getting ready with September 23rd is our release date. We're going to do this August multiplayer beta, and it's really, you want to test out all the systems. We're going to the BattleNet, global BattleNet servers, and we're gonna have all these Blizzard servers running, and we want to be able to see, okay, let's put a large load on it, let's test our services, let's test our servers, and get people playing that experience they didn't get to play in the technical alpha. So some great things. One is, obviously, again, the big difference is multiplayer versus single player, so the beta is unique for that. And so you can either bring people together and play co-op up to 8 people, or play PvP if you want to. And then it's on console, so this will be the first time people get to experience D2R on console, which will be a big moment. And then we're expanding the classes, so we're allowing people to play 5 classes instead of the 3 in alpha. So we've added the druid and the paladin to the mix, and so again, you can go in and play as a druid or paladin and see how they play as well.
I've heard that you are a big fan of the redone cinematics, so all of the cinematics have been like revamped. That's kind of wild. Can you take me behind the scenes in terms of how the team did approach that, or even like just pulled it off?
Yeah, I mean, it was really around, when we look at the philosophy of the game, the philosophy is really about it's a remaster, not a remake. Like we're taking the purity and the authenticity of the original, and we want to just elevate it with, with sort of 4K art and the surround sound and such. And so, but when we looked at the cinematics, like a lot of remasters will take the cinematics and say, oh, let's just up-res them, or do something that, because you don't necessarily have the source material anymore, and you can't just kind of work from what you had years ago. And we just felt like when you think about D2R or D2, it's such a genre defining game, and it had such a meaningful moment in time 20 years ago that we felt like it really deserved to have the cinematics remade. And so we went into it going, okay, well, we don't want to change how we tell the story, and we don't want to change what the story is, because people talked about like, oh, could you shorten it, or could you give a different perspective, or could you, and we were like, no, we want to be faithful to the source material, but what we want to do is bring it forward again in a really modern way. And so we went in and we have a story and franchise development team called SFD at Blizzard, that they're the ones who work on all the amazing cinematics that Blizzard makes. And so we partnered with them, and we were able to work with another partner called Access. I don't know if you know them, but I worked with them on Gears of War as well as part of our Hivebuster trailer. But they all came together, and we're going to remake this shot for shot in the highest CG that we can do in the time that we have, and you get a taste of that in the trailer. You get to see little snippets of it, and I can't wait for people to see more, because it's everyone did a phenomenal job. Like again, I feel like it elevates D2R because the quality of the storytelling now, like you get all that detail that you maybe didn't see before. The were those beetles on the floor? Or were those spiders on the floor? Like, no,
Yeah.
they're beetles. They're beetles. Like I can see that detail, and I can see, all the different things that are happening and sort of the storytelling that's going on in the environment and on the characters and their faces and their emotions that they're having. And so I love it, and I think it really takes it to another place.
I have one more question, and it's kind of a broad one to hit to you, but you've moved to Blizzard fairly recently, and it's still kind of wild to think that you are representing Diablo now. But what have been the biggest changes going from shaping Gears of War and now shaping Diablo? Like how you work, what you work on, the things you focus on in game development, how you handle your teams. What has changed for you, man?
I think the number one thing has got to be the pandemic. I only had 8 days in office when I first arrived, and then we're all working from home. And where I'm used to being, walking the halls and standing up in front of the team and working with people one-on-one and such. That everything is through a video camera now, and it's been surreal to do that. And I've been with them now 15 months, and it's like I said, except for 8 days, it's all been through a camera. And so it's really changed how I try to lead. It changes how I communicate. It changes a lot of things. And so it's also been interesting because we're with Gears. I joined Gears back in 2005, and I was basically there pretty much the whole way. And I was kind of the person who was the keeper of the lore and the keeper of the franchise. I was the creative director of it. And so I was the one teaching, and others were learning. And now I'm coming into a franchise that I've loved, since the original D1, and having played it for all this time. But still, I'm coming in as a student that I don't know all the lore, and I don't know every secret and where every skeleton is kind of in their closet around, like how the game works and the way that certain details about certain systems. And so I've had to come in much more as a student of the game than I was when I was the head of the coalition, sort of running Gears of War. So that's been really interesting. It's part of what it's what helped inspire me to do this. Was just, it's a new challenge, getting to work on one of my favorite franchises, and getting to work with the caliber of talent I get to work at Blizzard. So it's been interesting. Like I said, doing it from my dining room in North Carolina is a strange place to be trying to lead 3 Diablo games to ship, but it's been exciting.
I appreciate the time that you gave to us to talk about Diablo and your work and your career. Is there anything else that you want to share before I let you go here?
I think the one thing that I really want to call out too around the beta is just that the pre-order is happening. So that's one of the big things, is that with our announcing our ship date at the E3 event, we can now take pre-orders for console in terms of and what that also, those pre-orders allows you to get into the open beta sooner. So we're actually going to do the beta in 2 phases, and so there'll be a pre-order access phase and then an open phase. So I highly recommend, and we have a really cool, if you pre-order the game, you'll actually get a transmog in D3 that'll allow you to change your barbarian, both male and female, to look like the Diablo II barbarian, which I think is really kind of cool to have that iconic barbarian look in D3. So that's coming, and like I said, and getting access to the pre-order beta would be a great time to get in, and like I said, get to play the 5 classes, get to see the game, and get to play early with your friends.
Rod Fergusson, thank you so much for your time, man. Take care. And Diablo 2 Resurrected is coming soon. Y'all should peep that too. And thank you all for watching this segment here on Diablo 2 Resurrected. I want you all to stick to GameSpot.com because we have so many more interviews, gameplay reveals, trailers, and live streams because we are raising money for able gamers. And I hope to see you all around next time.